Hello. Um, let's see. I'm gonna talk about the gods, I think. Um, like, seems like from what I've figured out, that the gods were primarily planets. At least, like, the main gods seem to have been planets. Um, you know, it seems to follow largely the uh, formula of the book Hamlet's Mill, which basically has that hypothesis that the planets are the main gods, and the other maybe lesser gods or more peripheral gods are the constellations, which the planets are seen to interact with. Um, and because the planets are more mobile than a lot of the stars, or probably than any of the stars. I don't really know, honestly. Like I know that there are the fixed stars called the decans that are in the northern sky, which are you know, that don't move a lot, certainly compared to the planets. And I think some of them might always stay above the horizon. Um, Maybe they all do, I don't know. But it seems like the ancients, they divided up the planet into sections. Often there'd be 14 sections, seven for um, the quote unquote world, and seven for the underworld. And this, meaning would depend on where one was situated. Like for the Afro-Eurasians, the underworld is America, and uh, I think there were a couple different underworld traditions, you could say. Like one was the antipodal underworld, and which is basically like the exact opposite side of the planet. And then the other was the hemispherical, or the like the underworld. I don't know. Basically, another concept of underworld is basically which is probably the more commonly used one, or was the more commonly used one, was just to refer to whatever landmass um, is like west across the ocean. Uh, so, it might not be exactly antipodal, like, but it's basically to say that there are two worlds. There are two, there's, as they said, as the Europeans said in the 1400s or whenever, there's the old world and the new world. I mean, people can debate whether those are appropriate terms, but the point is, Africa and Eurasia together were referred to as a world. And so, in that sense, that's a world, and the underworld for them is America, and vice versa. The people in America, their underworld was Afro Eurasia. And so, a lot of the stories of gods revolve around the underworld. And this is because one of the main things that celestial bodies do is they, you know, travel across the sky, quote unquote, and descend below the horizon on the western side. And so, you know, they are basically going down to the underworld. Like when a star, when a um, star goes below the Afro-Eurasian western horizon, then, you know, presumably it's visible still to the people in the underworld, to America. And so it's technically in the underworld. Uh, so, like in the early stories, like Inanna was always going to the underworld. Um, and Inanna is Venus, the planet Venus. And Ninurta was also, this is in Sumerian literature, like Ninurta was always going to the, or you know, went to the underworld. Um, and, or at least Ninurta had a battle against the underworld in one of the early Sumerian texts. Um, and it was like Ninurta versus Kur, which Kur being the underworld. And there was a story of, I'm not sure if there was an Inanna versus Kur. I think there was an Enki versus Kur story as well. Enki, it's hard to exactly know which celestial body Enki refers to. There's not really a consensus on that, or I don't think he's generally not even thought to be linked to a celestial body, but based on being placed in the same story um, as uh, Ninurta, who is Saturn. Um, you know, it seems that if he's going to play the same role in the same, basically the same story, Ninurta versus Kur and Enki versus Kur, and also the fact that it just seems like the main gods of all these religions are planets, and Enki is certainly one of the main gods, you know, along with Inanna and Lil in the Sumerian pantheon. So, you know, I think Enki was associated with the south and maybe the southernmost heaven. So, might have either been a planet that was uh, retrograde, or not really sure which celestial body Enki is. Um, but one key to understanding which god is what seems to be the weekdays of uh, of like the Western calendar or whatever, because in English we have the weekdays, um, you know, basically, you know, they're English, they're old Anglo-Saxon, Germanic names for every day except Saturday. Saturday, they use the Latin for Saturn. Um, and I'm not sure why that is. Interestingly, Saturday is the one day that all the Latin languages omit the old name, and they replace it with a new name. But that's the one day that in English they import the old Latin name. But I think that the weekdays are, um, I mean, in many ways, calendars and the tracking of time is central to understanding all of this, like ancient religion and cosmology. But certainly that's true in the case of our weekdays, because we have, you know, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and those all, you know, we also know the weekdays in Latin, and you know that they're used in all these Latin languages. Like I know in Spanish, they say, I mean, Domingo is Sunday. It means like day of our Lord or something. Um, Lunes, I think, is Monday, for the moon. Like it's all the same. Like um, we call it Monday, which is Moon Day, and they call it Lunes, which is lunar, Luna. That's their name for the moon. So there's differences certainly. Like moon, a lot of people don't realize moon is just as much a deity as a celestial body, and just as sun. Sun is sun is a woman, and moon is a male. So it's reversed from the Latin system, but but I think there's a lot of overlap between all these systems, and particularly it seems that there's certain characteristics that are either universally or nearly universally applied to certain planets. So the most obvious is Jupiter. So just to run through the which planet is which, like Monday, Sunday is the day of the sun. Monday is the day of the moon. Tuesday is the day of Mars, who is the Nordic god Tyr, or Tyr, or something like that, Tyr. Um, uh, Wednesday is Woden's day, Odin's day, and Odin is um, Mercury, the planet Mercury, and in the Latin languages, it's just called Mercury. Like in Spanish, it's miércoles, it's Wednesday. Um, Thursday, Thor's day, is Jueves, which is the planet Jupiter. So Jupiter seems to represent, um, Thor, the god of thunder and everything, also Zeus, and the Latin Roman Jupiter himself is the god of gods and the god of storms and everything. And like there's only one other storm god that I can fully confirm whether or not they're associated with Jupiter, and that's Marduk of the Babylonians. And he was their storm god, and he was basically the counterpart of uh, Enlil and Baal. He's kind of the same person, and he's is associated with Jupiter as well. So the fact that I have never found a storm god that can be proven to not be Jupiter, and yet I can find four easily that are confirmed as Jupiter, is a strong indication that um, and the fact that these are somewhat far afield, Scandinavia from Mesopotamia, that chances are, since storm gods are so similar across cultures, chances are they're all Jupiter, or at the very least that most of the kind of primary storm gods that fit this type of archetype are Jupiter. Um, so Thor. Then Friday is viernes in Spanish, so it's Venus, and in English it's Friday for Frigg. Frigg is the wife of Odin or Thor or something. She's like a major goddess in the Nordic pantheon. Um, and and then Saturday is the one that's more of a mystery, because in English they just say Saturday, which is from Latin. For some reason they don't give a Germanic name, but that may be I mean, there are people that believe, and it seems very plausible that Saturn is actually Loki, and in some languages they do refer to Saturday as basically Logi, like basically like etymologically almost identical to Loki. So yeah, chances are, I can't fully confirm, but chances are that Saturn is Loki, which makes sense because, Loki is kind of this wild, chaotic spirit, and like in the Latin, Roman pantheon, Saturnalia, that's like the day, Saturn's holiday, is like a chaotic, time of debauchery and everything. Like, so, and it may have something to do with the strange course that Saturn takes through the sky. I'm not really sure if it has direct connections to the actual movements of Saturn. Um, so, those are basically the main gods of the Nordic pantheon. And, and, you know, in pretty much every other way, the Nordic religion is it follows the basic schemata or the formula of pretty much every ancient religion. It's not dramatically different in any obvious way. Um, and so, chances are, and we see like again in the Sumerian pantheon, Inanna, Ninurta, um, these are very important gods, like central gods. Inanna is, one of the most important deities, and she's known to be associated with Venus. So I would say, like, at least the weight of evidence suggests that the main gods of of ancient religion were uh, at least primarily planets in our solar system, and that Venus was called the Inanna was called the Queen of Heaven because she Venus is the brightest planet in the sky. Reportedly, I think the ancients said that Venus is the only planet that casts a shadow, whose light casts a shadow on the Earth. Can't confirm that, but that's quite interesting. But that would make sense for why she would be the Queen of Heaven. Um, Also, Jupiter is, Thor is called the most powerful god, I believe, and and that's like his main attribute, you could say, as along with all these other storm gods. And this may fit with the fact that uh, Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. So that may correlate with this impression of strength. Um, and or it could also, the role of Jupiter as the storm god could be related to uh, like if in the Egyptian pantheon, Seth, the storm god, is usually or is often associated with Mercury, but that could be erroneous. I think a lot of these planets can get mixed up between each other, and you know, um, Thoth is generally considered to be the moon, but the ancient Greeks called Thoth Hermes, and Hermes uh, is Mercury. So I think that chances are, I could be wrong, but chances are that all the modern Egyptologists are wrong, and the ancient Greeks were right, and Thoth is in fact Mercury, and Seth is not Mercury, and Seth is probably Jupiter, just like all these other storm gods. And um, like in the Egyptian tradition, these gods are often given places in the solar bark, the solar boat at night, or when the sun is moving, there would be like certain gods will be at the prow of the boat, certain gods will be at the back of the boat, certain gods will be port, certain gods will be starboard. So it could be their positioning in the sky that also determines which, that could be the reason that Jupiter is the storm god. It seems that Seth is often at the prow of the boat, and when the sun, when Ra is setting, and is being attacked, in the sunset. Like the sunset, I think, is the blood of Ra being attacked by the, what the Norse called the Midgard serpent, and what the Egyptians called Apophis, which is the serpent in the ocean. Um, it's Seth who fights off Apophis at the prow of the boat and, like, spears him. And similarly, it's Thor who attacks the Midgard serpent with his hammer. So, so yeah, it could actually have to do with the order of these planets in the sky. Um, but, or it could just be more random. Who knows? Chances are it's not as random as it seems. But either way, it seems clear that there's at least a strong case to be made that all the main gods. Oh, and another, okay, like the main gods of the Mesoamerican pantheon, like the Aztecs and Mayans and Mixtecs, was Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is Venus. So in this case, just as the moon and sun are different genders in different civilizations, Venus is a male in the Mesoamerican tradition, as well in the Latin tradition to some extent, because there's in the Roman tradition, they they had the morning star and the evening star. um, you know I believe this was, yeah, they had Lucifer and Noctifer, and which corresponded to the Greek Phosphorus and uh, Hesperus, and and these were males, these were men. So in that sense, the Mesoamerican tradition is closer to that Southern European tradition, um, whereas uh, in the Nordic tradition, Venus is Frigg, the goddess. In the Mesopotamian tradition, Venus is, and I mean, Venus itself, Venus is a goddess as well. So it may be that she was, basically both. Like maybe the overall Venus was a woman, but just the two, uh, aspects of Venus were male, like the Lucifer and Noctifer. The morning side and the evening side were male, and maybe between those, or somehow overall, Venus was female. And in the Mesopotamian tradition, Inanna and Ishtar are Venus. And it seems to me um, extremely likely that Isis and Nephthys in the Egyptian pantheon are Venus as well, are basically Lucifer and Noctifer, the morning star and the evening star. And, this would explain why they're so important, and why they're called Isis of the East and Nephthys of the West. They're always shown one on each side of Osiris. And and why they unite together in the goddess of Ma'at. Like there's no other Egyptian deities that I know of that, are so well known to just join together into another deity. So yeah, like Isis and Nephthys, even in depictions, they will show them, and then they will show them one behind the other, and then when one is behind the other, they become a new goddess. They become Ma'at, and they're called the Sisters of Ma'at, Maat. So, very and they play a very similar role in the flood story as what to what Inanna Ishtar plays in the Mesopotamian flood story. Like the Egyptian flood story um, is Seth's the story of Seth's attack on Osiris. Osiris is an earth god. I don't. He might have a celestial counterpart as well, but he certainly is associated with the earth. And Seth being the storm god. In the Mesopotamian tradition, it is Isis, or I mean, it is Inanna Ishtar, who is one of the main deities that comes to mourn over the flooded, Sumerians and the flooded people and land, and you know, in the Egyptian tradition, it is Isis who most famously, and also Nephthys, who most famously come and mourn over the flooded land, um, which is Osiris. And so yeah, all this points to like those are, let's say Thoth is Mercury. I mean, the official version is that he's the moon, so even that would be in this ballpark. But if he's Mercury, if Thoth is Mercury, Seth is Jupiter, and um, Isis and Nephthys are Venus. Again, these are some of the main deities in that pantheon. So it strongly supports this the theory that most major gods in ancient religions were planets in our solar system, and that the stories of these gods interacting and traveling around, whatever, is the stories. It describes these planets, the movement of these planets, down to the underworld, back again, and how they interact with each other and the sun and the moon. Um, so, I mean, we all know that Ra is the sun, that at least. That's the one that there's no real disagreement about. Um, and yet, it seems hard for people to understand that here's Ra